Texas has just passed a law banning abortions.
Well, tonight it is nearly impossible to get an abortion in Texas.
The state's controversial law banning most abortions has now taken effect.
Even before this new law, it was difficult to get an abortion in Texas.
The Texas Heartbeat Act prohibits abortions after 6 weeks of pregnancy. The law came into effect on September 1st, months after Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed it last May and after the U.S. Supreme Court formally denied a request from Texas abortion providers to freeze the new law. The law gives any individual the right to sue doctors who perform an abortion past the 6-week point. Anyone who successfully sues an abortion provider under this law could be awarded at least $10,000. The thing is, after 6 weeks of a pregnancy, many women don't even know if they are pregnant. The Texas law is one of many recent efforts to limit abortions in states controlled by Republicans. 3 other states, Idaho, Oklahoma, and South Carolina, have passed 6-week ban bills this year, all of which have been stalled by legal challenges and are yet to go into effect. Democrats support abortion rights while Republicans oppose them. But how did abortion become a political issue, and why are Americans so obsessed with it? It's hard to believe now, but abortion hasn't always been the political firestorm it is today. In the 1960s, the Republican Party was actually more abortion-friendly than the Democrats. The Republican Party didn't like state intervention in people's lives. The issue of abortion first came to light when in 1962, Sherry Chesson sought an abortion after discovering that her fetus had several deformities. After having difficulties getting abortion in the US, she and her husband flew to Sweden, where they were able to successfully obtain a legal abortion. In 1973, the US Supreme Court made a decision that a woman may terminate her pregnancy prior to the viability of the fetus outside the womb. The landmark Roe v. Wade decision legalized abortion in the entire country.
In a landmark ruling, the Supreme Court today legalized abortions.
No one objected to this decision except one group, the Catholic Church. The description pro-life was adopted by the anti-abortion movement run by the Catholic Church following Roe v. Wade. The term pro-life was used instead of anti-abortion to highlight the belief that abortion is the taking of a human life, rather than an issue concerning the restriction of women's reproductive rights, as the pro-choice movement would say.
I think all of us should have a respect for innocent life. With regard to the freedom of the individual for choice with regard to abortion, there's one individual who's not being considered at all. That's the one who's being aborted.
The main force behind the pro-life movement was a pair of men named Paul Weyrich, a political activist, and Jerry Falwell, a preacher. The 60s and 70s were a time of change. Movements like civil rights movement, feminism, and pro-LGBT movement were gaining more and more support and pushing their way into the mainstream politics. Weyrich's mission was to crush the liberalism that was threatening the conservative America. The two men were on the hunt for any issue to fight liberalism that was on the rise. The issue they picked to attract more Catholics and fight back against the liberals was abortion. They portrayed abortion as a human rights issue, an issue that concerned the human rights of unborn babies. In just a few years, abortion went from a non-issue to a massive moral concern for millions of Catholics. It was an era where more than 2/3 of the Catholics were Democrats. The Catholic bishops framed their opposition to abortion as a human rights campaign that they hoped would appeal to liberal Democrats.
What is the most important issue confronting the American people in this election campaign? The American people want leaders who will keep the peace without surrender for America and the world.
Before Roe v. Wade, the majority of Republicans were not anti-abortion. including most of the party's leadership, which typically cited abortion rights as included within an ideology of limited government intervention and personal freedom. In 1976, public opinion polls showed that Republican voters were on average more pro-choice than their Democratic counterparts. Republicans were a minority party in the 1960s, but strategists associated with Richard Nixon believed that if the Republican Party could find a way to appeal to Catholics, the party could improve its electoral prospects. At the 1976 Republican National Convention, the party adopted an anti-abortion amendment as part of their platform, even though fewer than 40% of the delegates considered themselves pro-life. The party's leadership viewed the measure as a temporary political ploy that would increase the GOP's appeal among Catholics, a demographic which had traditionally voted Democratic. The abortion policy played a pivotal role in transforming the Republican Party into a party of conservative Catholics and evangelicals. Although Republicans did not perceive its importance at the time, their decision to adopt an anti-abortion stance in 1976 created the basis for the party's outreach to social conservatives. Even though abortion wasn't a central issue at the time, the Republican Party talked more and more about it and soon made it one of their key election issues. And it worked. In 1980, Ronald Reagan won the presidential election, and the US got its first president with a pro-life agenda. The irony is, in 1966, Ronald Reagan was the governor who legalized abortion in California, and now he was the president who was against abortion. As the political power of the pro-life movement became so clear, there just was no place for people in the Republican Party who were pro-choice. And as conservative Catholics and evangelicals gained control of the GOP, they bolstered the party's pro-life stance, ensuring that the issue would remain a central consideration in national elections. Since 1980, all the Republican presidents have been pro-choice. Abortion is one of the hottest debates in the country. The clashes between pro-life and pro-choice demonstrators are very frequent. The Supreme Court of the United States has a conservative majority, and a lot of people fear that Roe v. Wade would be overturned soon. Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota, who is considered a potential Republican candidate for president in 2024, said she had directed her office to make sure South Dakota has the strongest pro-life laws on the books. Democratic voters care more about candidates' abortion views than Republicans do. In a survey conducted in 2017, 71% of Democrats said they were more likely to vote for a candidate who supported abortion rights, while just 36% of Republicans said they were more likely to vote for someone who opposed abortion. Gallup polling in 2019 found that 25% of Americans believe abortion should be legal under any circumstances. The same poll found that 21% of Americans believe abortion should not be legal. Surveys of abortion beliefs consistently show that the majority of Americans believe abortion should be legal in some, but not all circumstances. The pro-life movement emerged as a backlash against feminism, civil rights movement, and Roe v. Wade. The core ideological belief of the pro-life movement is that human life begins at the moment of conception, and that this life, being morally equal to any other human life, is entitled to the same legal protection as any other human. So abortion went from a non-issue to one of the key issues, and the reason for it is quite simple: political ambitions. Abortion in the US is nothing but a cynical political ploy to manipulate voting blocs.